It's that time of year. Time when we pick the best of the best Spider-Man action figures released in 2024. Hey y'all, welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics history and action figures. Each year, we name the best Spidey figures we picked up over the last 12 months, and we don't just review them, we get into the emotional attachments and comic lore that make these the best of the best. Starting off our countdown at the 10 spot is the Hot Toys comic masterpiece Spider-Man. We're going to start out with one of the rarest Spider-Man figures that I own. This 12-inch cloth costume Spidey was a Hot Toys Hong Kong exclusive, which I believe was limited to only 400 pieces. Sideshow Toys offered an exact replica in the States that was limited to 2,000, so either way, it's a pretty hard figure to find. Most of the Hot Toys Spidey figures I own have been movie related, but this is firmly a comic version. So much so that it came with two different comic logos to display. A classic Amazing Spider-Man design, and then this one that represents the 90s logo. While this figure does have very classic styling, from the bright red and blue colors to the spider logos on the front and back, the eyes place it squarely in the 1990s. The figure comes with 4 sets of replaceable magnetic eyes, but due to the design, they're all going to be the big versions favored by 90s artists, but each has its own unique flavor. These most closely represent the art of Mark Bagley, while these with the deeper black outlines are reminiscent of Eric Larsen's work. I can see some Humberto Ramos in the super squinty versions, and the silver reflective lenses remind me of Alex Ross's paintings of the web slinger. As you would expect from a high-end import, you get numerous hands. I really love how you can switch out the palms on the thwippy hands to get him in the act of shooting a web. And this fist holds the spaghetti webbing just like a comic panel. There are even comic-accurate web shooters. Nice touch. Despite the cloth costume, this guy can really bend, and you can achieve some super cool poses, although that does run the risk of permanently wrinkling the fabric. I mean, if this is the number 10 figure, who else is on this list? It just keeps getting better, with the Revoltech Amazing Yamaguchi 2.0 Spidey in the 9 slot. Look, I make a bunch of Spidey videos, and probably the most common figure I get asked about is the original V1 Yamaguchi Spider-Man. And yes, I do own it, but I've never really liked it. I know. But for me, all that articulation comes at the expense of a classic Spider-Man sculpt. I just can't see this figure as a traditional Spidey to put in my display. Which is why it is so odd that I like this version 2.0 as much as I do. I think it's in part because it's based on the Spider-Man Mark IV armor, the one that was designed by Alex Ross, for which he provided the painted covers during the Parker Industries storyline. Probably because it's a non-traditional Spidey look, I'm cool with the non-traditional articulation. Plus, just look at everything this guy comes with. Glowing webs, 4 bonus sets of eyes, 5 extra sets of hands. They even take a shot at removable web wings. Yeah, still haven't figured that one out. Hey, that stuff is cool and all, but this figure is all about posing. So let's take a look at some of the super crunchy Spidey poses it can get into. So I'll admit it, y'all were right and I was wrong. This figure is pretty cool. The 8 spot has the first of several entries from Across the Spider-Verse with Spider-Man India. I went and saw Across the Spider-Verse on opening night, and at the cinema, they actually handed out these really cool cards of the different characters. Here's Spider-Gwen, here's Spider-Woman, who we had actually seen as an action figure, but then they came to this one. Spider-Man India. I had done everything I could to stay spoiler-free for this, and this was the first image I had seen of Paviter Pavarkar. I tried my best. I really tried to work on the pronunciation. But I saw this character and immediately fell in love and have been waiting to see it in action figure form. And when Hasbro busted this out in the most recent lineup of Marvel Legends, oh, I just think it is absolutely incredible. So that second wave of Spider-Verse figures had some action figures that were using, kind of mostly redone sculpts. The Spider-Man, the Peter Parker, the Spidey 2099, even the Spider-Punk was basically just a recolor. But there were a couple of completely new figures in that line. One of them, of course, was Spider-Man India. And what a great use of a unique sculpt with such an incredible paint application. I love the flow of his hair. Look at all the details, the way that the mask comes around but has like the little horns, the eyes. This just has so much character to it. The feet with the toes exposed, the bangles that he has both at his ankles and his wrist, and his yo-yo weapon, which echoes this. I love this design. I love the colors. I love how they really managed to capture the spirit and the flavor of India and an Indian superhero, and yet still make it totally recognizable as Spider-Man. This one is on, they may have reused some of the parts for this body, but there's definitely new sculpting. I mean, that's sculpted in, and of course this head is just outstanding. Oh man, I tell you, this is one of my absolute favorite figures from this line, and I can't wait. I hope that we get more figures from across the Spider-Verse, and then whatever the next movie comes out, I can't wait to see what they produce from that. Warm up your typing fingers, all you keyboard warriors. I am ready for your comments, because I've got the McFarlane statues at number 7. Yeah, I know, it's kind of cheating. These statues by McFarlane Toys aren't really action figures. They technically don't have any action, as they're not articulated. But is that really accurate? Sure, some of us keep toys on our desk or in our pockets and do actually play with them from time to time. But in reality, most of us get our figures into a sweet pose and sit them on a shelf. So in that case, these figures have more action than most. In 2024, McFarlane Toys produced 4 different Spider-Man statues, 3 of which I have down in my new Spider-Man display, which is designed to showcase the artistic history of the web spinner. Steve Ditko's cover from issue 38, John Romita Sr.'s brilliant cover from issue 68, and art from Todd McFarlane himself from issue 6 of his run on the book. Each of these is in a scale just smaller than our typical 6-inch figures, but this spot on the list goes to the big one. The replica of Todd McFarlane's cover to Amazing Spider-Man 301. Trust me, I have tried many times to get an action figure into this pose in an attempt to replicate this cover, but it simply can't be done. I'm actually surprised they were able to make this thing with the artistic liberties McFarlane took getting Spidey into this famous pose. The spaghetti webs and ring background complete the look, and whether you agree with me putting this on the list of top Spidey figures of the year, no one can argue that it looks amazing on your shelf. And while I was filming this video, look what I found at my local Target. The black suit version from issue 300. These are gonna look great together. Guys, we are super close to a major subscriber milestone. So if you enjoy this combination of comics, history, and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring, because we're bringing you quality content like this every week. Back to the Spider-Verse for the 6th spot, but this time, it's one of the bad guys, with Miles Morales as the Prowler. The other figure from the second wave of Across the Spider-Verse figures that had a completely new sculpt was Miles Morales as the Prowler. That was such a cool kind of bait and switch at the end of that movie, where you don't realize, like, it's happening in real time. You see people in different dimensions, and then you realize, oh my gosh, Miles didn't go back to his original dimension. He is in a dimension where his uncle is alive, and he has taken on the role of the Prowler. And just look at these thin, he's got his shoes, he's got all the little details. I love the backpack. Somebody in a previous video had told me that I had the backpack upside down, so hopefully I fixed that. Hopefully this is the correct way that the backpack is supposed to go. His hair, not only does he have his rose here, but the way that the part of his hair is done, it creates like a spider pattern, almost like a spider mask on the top of his head, but still maintaining those great Prowler eyes. I love these giant, the shocker type gauntlets that he has that kind of come down with the electronics painted in, but he's still got like, his coat over his like sweatshirt look. This is such a brilliant design. It maintains kind of the look that Miles has created as Spider-Man, but makes it completely Prowler with the pink and the purple colors. Obviously, this is going to be a huge figure as we move forward into the next Spider-Verse film, and it's going to be just intense to see Miles versus Miles action. But until then, this guy has got to get back down into my Spider-Verse display because he is a crucial component of this story and just a brilliant figure moving forward. For number 5, let's just count all the ways that poor Ben Reilly has gotten dumped on over the years. Started out as a clone of Peter Parker, loses a fight to the death and gets dumped in a smokestack. Actually survives, then roams the country as a dirty hobo for years. Discovers that he's actually the one true Spider-Man, only to sacrifice himself to save Peter. Then dissolves, 'cause he was a clone after all. Comes back to life as a bad guy, regains his Spider-Man persona, only to be controlled by an evil corporation, and has a nervous breakdown becoming the villain Chasm. So if anybody deserves a killer action figure, it is my main man Ben Reilly, which he thankfully got with this retro cardback version of his Scarlet Spider persona. The figure is on the Renew Your Vows body, which, with its stockier frame, works for that 90s, more muscular comic look. And as anyone who has a figure on this body knows, the articulation can't be beat, all the way down to the toe joints. But it's not just a simple repaint. The hoodie is such an integral part of the Scarlet Spider's look, and this softer, rubbery plastic works really well. I appreciate the strings coming off of the hood. It gives it a real sense of motion. The eyes on this version are also the more angular look that we saw during the comics Clone Saga. It's a subtle thing, but it really places this figure in a specific time in comics history. The redemption of Ben Reilly continues in action figure form. One last trip to the Spider-Verse, rocking out in the 4 spot with SH Figuarts Spider-Punk. While Marvel Legends gave us what could very easily be considered the definitive Spider-Punk figure, SH Figuarts tried to take it up another level with their attention to detail in both sculpting, paint applications, and articulation with their version of Spider-Punk. This guy just rocks out. You can get his head back and his feet back, and he's just crushing it on his guitar. Let's look at his guitar first, because it has so many levels of paint application. You can see stickers, you can see paint, you can see spray paint. All of that is included here. The masked head is great with some seriously pointy spikes that are not all the same. They're not symmetrical as they go back, which is a very cool look. And he's almost got like the tear shape coming down off of the eyes on his mask. When we get to the paint applications, that's really where this figure shines. You can see the kind of pseudo web pattern that occurs on his arms, a little bit more down on his legs, but it really kind of helps to bring in that Spider-Man look. They want to touch on classic costume designs with these while still being incredibly original. And of course, he's got that 80s punk vibe with the leather jacket with the spikes, even down to the spikes along the zipper lines, and of course, that giant row of spikes across his back. The friendly neighborhood Spider-Man logo spray painted on there with the different buttons. He's got his Anarchy UK button, just all of this. The detail in the pants, though, the Marvel Legends figure had much of this detail going on up top, but they couldn't match what was done on his pants. He has like a plaid underlying factor, but then there's just graffiti drawn throughout the rest of this black pair of pants. I mean, you can see, there's words written on here. What is this? Something Kojurobi. There's graffiti, there's lines, there's pencil art. It comes down to these boots that are laced all the way up. You've got the straps of his suspenders hanging down. He's got 2 belts, one with the studs kind of wrapping around. Just, all of it. Here's like a black power symbol. Unbelievable amount of detail. And you still get that import level of articulation, just that smooth articulation that we've come to expect from these high-end import figures. I got no problems. I love my Marvel Legends Spider-Punk. And honestly, the Marvel Legends probably had a better looking Hobie head. The unmasked head, I think Marvel Legends actually did a better job. But as far as just attention to detail, you can't top this Figuarts Spider-Punk. We've made it to the podium finishers, and taking home the bronze in third place is the Mezco 112 Silver Age Spider-Man. Oh, I wanted so badly for this to be number one. Longtime viewers know how big a Steve Ditko fan I am, and the preview shots of this figure made it look like it was going to be the definitive Ditko figure of all time, and it is so close. I love the size of this figure. He's on a smaller body, which really matches the physique of a teenage Spidey, really representing the way Ditko drew him over the course of his run. These Mezco Silver Age figures are the perfect ones for the cloth costumes that the 112 series utilizes. There's just something old-fashioned about them, and these colors, the red and the blue, it just pops with that four-color goodness of the Silver Age comics. And I've had no problems with the cloth costume limiting the articulation, while at the same time, it totally hides the joints. Really nice. And of course, this head sculpt just screams Ditko. The distinctive eyes are a perfect match for the wall crawler. I love that the head seems slightly large for the body, as if he hasn't fully grown into it yet. One more aspect that just screams 60s Spider-Man. But it just didn't quite come through. The seam on the back is really unsightly, and not something I remember being a problem on previous Mezco figures. The spider logo is criminally small. Like, how do you miss this? And if there was ever a figure where it made sense to do web wings, why not include some stretchy material here? Totally would have worked with the cloth costume and the theme of the figure. So close, so good, but because of these flaws, only in the 3 spot. Otto is not going to like this, but the Superior Spider-Man is coming up in the penultimate spot. Believe it or not, Superior Spider-Man is one of my all-time favorite Spider-Man stories, and we actually got to see some evolution of Spider-Man's costume as Octavius continued to grow into the role of being Spider-Man. This was the first version of the costume. You can see there's that little bit of detail around the eyes and definitely a change in the spider logo on the back. It kind of almost has like 8 legs on there, kind of giving it more of an octopus sort of vibe, as well as the web pattern emanating from here instead of necessarily starting right here at the nose. This was a Diamond Select figure, and so far is the only version of this costume that we've gotten. I would love to see this done again in 6-inch scale. But Marvel Legends very quickly put out a Superior Spider-Man figure, and it's okay. I think that there were probably some corners that had to be cut. It basically reuses what I believe is the Sunfire body because it has these shoulders that I just don't really like. They got the chest symbol correct, and they got the asymmetrical web lines on there, but the paint's a little bit sloppy and it almost looks like more of a mess. They didn't get the gauntlet on his arms, but for something that came out so quickly after this thing debuted in comics, I gotta give them a little bit of slack for that. But thankfully, we have now gotten the definitive Superior Spider-Man, and this thing is just absolutely perfect. I love the way that the hands, and it comes with that claw grip so that you can expose the red on the inside that matches the red that kind of comes down at his feet. This center logo really kind of calls back to Ben Reilly's look, but is also all its own, the way that the black blends in together. And of course, his backpack with his extra arms. And this is, they're articulated. You can see that they'll move at each of these joints, so you can get some really cool posing with that. But I like the fact that you can also take it off and you can put a separate backpack on there. While we're getting a close-up look at the back, that asymmetry of the web lines comes through, but it's a little bit cleaner than on the earlier figure, so it doesn't look like it just was a paint mistake. It definitely looks as though it were purposeful on this one. But I think probably the definitive standout feature of this figure is those face printing on the eyepieces that give it the look of mirrored lenses. So, I mean, I remember when I first saw this figure, I'm like, oh my gosh, they put mirrored lenses on it. They're not. That's actually inkjet printed, but that kind of faded out cityscape makes it look exactly as though they were in fact mirrored. It's just such a cool effect that makes this figure stand out from every other Spider-Man that's been produced. He's on the Renew Your Vows body, another great use of this body, and I just can't think of a single thing to fuss at about this Superior Spider-Man. It is truly a superior figure from a superior storyline. And now, at last, the best Spider-Man figure of 2024, SH Figuarts Final Swing Spider-Man. There's no such thing as a perfect Spider-Man. There's no such thing as a perfect Spider-Man. There's no such thing as a perfect Spider-Man. But boy, this bad boy comes awfully close. If you were in theaters on opening night and you saw that final swing suit, you knew that all was right with the world. Yes, Peter had gone through unbelievable trauma. He had lost his friends. They had lost their memory of him. He had the heartbreaking scene in the donut shop with Ned and MJ, but then it becomes all classic with this great red and blue. And what SH Figuarts managed to do with this was bring that movie look with the really, really shiny metallic blue, but create a classic Spider-Man vibe with it. These eyes are so John Romita Sr. I mean, it just calls back to the late 60s through the 70s. The costume itself is incredibly classic in design. I think it's important to remember how the costume carries down across his shoulder, but then is blue underneath the arms. And when he's in different poses, you can see it really does create almost a completely different dynamic because of that. The spider on the front, very comic looking. The spider on the back calls back to the original Sam Raimi movie. So instead of kind of a big round comic spider, you get the more movie one. So this really does create a chimera, a look that kind of bridges the gap between the comic world and the movie world. And this thing would find a home equally well in either one of those displays. But the way that the light shines off of this blue metallic paint is it's just terrific. Now, again, there is no such thing as a perfect Spider-Man. The shoulders have a little bit of gap to them when they're here. The hips have that, let's just say, unique look that SH Figuarts gives. And when you bend him into a crouching position, this ring of red separates from the belt line, which, I don't know. I don't know that we necessarily needed that. I guess it kind of works better when he's upright. But overall, this is just a brilliant figure. One that, again, it captures so many different eras of Spider-Man in one place that for me, this had to be the top Spider-Man figure of 2024. Which of your favorite Spideys did I leave off the list? And who should have been higher or lower this time around? Let me know in the comments. And as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.